Good morning, afternoon, or evening to all of you, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Puneet Oza, Executive Director of Singapore Chamber of Maritime Arbitration. Welcome all to this event. Let me start with some housekeeping rules. Questions are most welcome. Please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen to post questions, and I will direct them to the relevant or specified panelists. In case we are not able to answer any questions due to paucity of time, we will try and email the answers back to the questionnaire. So keep them coming. There will be polls throughout the event relevant to the topic being discussed or presented. So please do participate in these polls, and we thank you for your participation in advance. Finally, there'll be a post-webinar survey, which you can fill out by scanning a QR code at the end of the webinar. Please do help us with that as well. Your feedback is very, very valuable to us. Scma is proud to host this event as a part of Singapore Maritime Week. My congratulations to Kuala Lehun, the CEO of MPA, and the entire MPA team, and all other organizations who are hosting events this week. It has been a superbly organized and executed event. This theme of SMW this year is New Frontiers, Shifting Paradigms. COVID-19 has brought a whole new normal for all of us. This is the first instance in my life that the entire world is facing this common challenge. Maritime industry, we must be proud to say, has performed admirably in this pandemic to adapt and ensure that supply chains and lifelines continue to run as smoothly as possible. The real stars of this effort are our heroes, are the seafarers. A sincere thanks to them. Scma is proud to support the Singapore Shipping Tripartite Alliance Resilience Fund, or SG Star Funds, a truly global alliance. It is facilitating concrete solutions to promote and facilitate crew change and assist our heroes. We are thankful to all the participants to our recent SAL Scma virtual mock arbitration, whose profits were donated to SG Star Fund. We also like to thank the supporting organizations for this event today: Baltic Exchange, GUARD, Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers, Singapore Branch, Singapore Academy of Law, Singapore Institute of Arbitrators, Singapore Shipping Association, and Vista Singapore. Today's event promises to be very exciting and hopes to provide viewpoints on key challenges thrown up by COVID-19, innovative solutions developed, changing nature of disputes during COVID-19, the practical aspects of virtual hearing, and a peek into the future of arbitration. Before we get the panel discussion, we really look forward to hearing some thoughts from Kuala Lehun, Chief Executive of MPA and a board member of Scma. Ms. Kuala Lehun joined the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore as Chief Executive Designate on 1st November 2018 and was subsequently appointed to the Chief Executive with effect 1st January 2019. Prior to this, she was with MediaCorp as Chief Editor in Channel News Asia. She has more than 12 years of work experience in public sector, ranging from economic policies to environmental and social policies. Lehun is on board of many organizations, including the Scma. She was awarded the Public Administration Medal Silver in 2017. Welcome, Ms. Kuala Lehun. We look forward to your opening remarks. Can you please unmute yourself and also get the video going? Hi, Lehun. Welcome.
Okay. Hi, Puneet. Thank you so much for the introduction. Good afternoon, Josh Chow, Chairman of Scma, and ladies and gentlemen. Very big thank you to Singapore Chamber of Maritime Arbitration, or Scma, for organizing this webinar during this Singapore Maritime 2021. Now, I'm really very glad to see arbitration featured in this year's Singapore Maritime Week. It is a very key component in Maritime Singapore because it offers a neutral, cost-effective, and flexible framework to settle disputes fair and expeditiously. Now, as what Puneet earlier mentioned, despite the pandemic, Maritime Singapore, including Scma, fared well last year. Now look at our port. We handled the second highest container throughput in history at 36.9 million TEUs. We handled the second highest bunkering volume in history. And we've had our highest vessel tonnage arrival in 2020. We have 17 international shipping groups either set up in Singapore or expanded their operations here. So Singapore will continue to work with our industry to grow and bring new operations into Singapore. Let's talk about SCMA. SCMA saw a 5% increase in cases handled. And I know that SCMA prides itself as a unique service provider to the maritime and trade ecosystem, in line with SCMA's new vision to become the leading maritime arbitration center in Asia. I thought I would share 3 key thoughts on how I see arbitration further contributing to the dynamism of maritime Singapore. What I say, the PIN, just like a pin, P-I-N, which is essential when it comes to sewing the pieces together. P for pragmatism, I for industry outreach, and N for new offerings. Now first, pragmatism. How do we make arbitration the primary option for dispute settlement? Now it is said that when in conflict with someone, there is one factor that can make the difference between damaging your relationship and deepening it. Now, what one needs in this case is a pragmatic way out where trust and relationship can be preserved. Arbitration offers neutrality, autonomy, and confidentiality. Through conducting non-administered arbitration, institutions such as the SCMA provide speedy and cost-effective resolution. So how does Singapore fare when it comes to the international arbitration space? Now, in the 2018 Queen Mary White and Case survey, Singapore ranked the most preferred seat of arbitration in Asia and 3rd in the world in the same survey. This suggests that Singapore as an arbitration seat is well accepted by parties from all around the world. And there are good reasons for this. We have a trusted legal system, a supportive judiciary, and modern progressive laws. We regularly review them to keep up with international best practices and business needs. In addition, Singapore offers a full suite of dispute resolution institutions supported by world-class infrastructure for dispute resolution hearings. So generally, the more efficient and expeditious the resolution, the better it is for parties. That was the thinking when MPA and the Singapore Maritime Foundation, SMF, supported the reconstitution of SCMA in 2009. Whole objective is to provide a neutral, cost-effective, and flexible arbitration framework for the international maritime community. So I've done with the first P. Second is really about the industry. SCMA needs to and must stay close to the industry to cater to their needs. Now, achieving the goal of the preferred maritime arbitration center in Asia will require the collective efforts of all stakeholders. Stakeholders, as many of you in the audience, SCMA's users and members. Because why? You are a rich source of feedback on user experience. SCMA, therefore, will need to stay close to the industry so as to continually take in feedback and refine its rules, procedures, and services. Another critical group of the stakeholders for SCMA must be its panel of arbitrators. Over the years, SCMA has built a panel of over 110 dedicated maritime experts specializing in a wide range of practice areas. This lends credibility. In addition, the diversity of arbitrators across 17 countries of residence strengthens SCMA's credence as an international institution. Now, I understand that SCMA is enhancing its empanelment process to continue growing its panel to be highly skilled to resolve disputes of the future. Next group will be the youth, and these youth will be our next generation industry leaders. So we need to engage the youth and the leaders of tomorrow. So to that end, I understand that SCMA has opened a new category of student membership to raise awareness of arbitration and SCMA. So these student members would become brand ambassadors for SCMA as they progress to the workforce. So I've talked about P, pragmatism, I, industry, and now my third, N, new offerings. Arbitration institutions must tap on new trends such as digitalization and decarbonization to offer greater value. Through this pandemic, we've seen the acceleration of digitalization in many industries. We are now seeing technology tools being incorporated into various aspects of the arbitration process, such as virtual hearings. In October 2020, SCMA published the specimen directions for virtual hearings to provide guidance to arbitrators, tribunals, and users. It also conducted an electronic public consultation exercise on Scma rules. Furthermore, Scma created QR codes to make communications on Scma clauses and case filing easier. So these are relatively simple but impactful development, which is appreciated by the industry. Besides digitalization, there's a lot of talk, and in fact, this morning we just launched, the IAP just launched their recommendations and reports to Singapore. Climate change will be an emerging trend. Climate change related dispute resolution is expected to gain traction. More stakeholders are participating in climate change activities, and this may have an impact on underlying agreements, contracts, or contractual terms. And these agreements on these terms can give rise to climate change disputes, including in the maritime sector. So Scma must position itself to meet the industry's emerging needs and build expertise in this field. So in the area of maritime arbitration, MPA will continue to support Scma as it works to strengthen its offerings and maintain its relevance to the businesses. And this is part of Singapore government's broader effort to develop Singapore as a leading center for dispute resolution. And I hope my sharing of the tree of PIN, being pragmatic, having been close to the industry and continue to offer new offerings to the industry will help and be useful. Let me also congratulate Scma on your new promotional video, which I think will be coming up next. I hope all of you will have a very insightful discussion at this webinar and a meaningful Singapore Maritime Week experience for the rest of the week. Thank you once again and look forward to Scma going to greater heights. Thank you, Punit, and all of you.
Thank you so very much, Lehun. The video coming up now. Thank you very much for your remarks. Thank you so very much. And thanks, Lehun, for those remarks. MPA's support, her personal support and support of maritime, trade and legal communities across the globe is crucial for Scma, as you mentioned. Thanks also to my team at Scma Secretariat, especially Winnie, for her efforts to make a succinct and a great video, along with a Why Choose Scma two-pager highlighting Scma's value proposition. So I can just highlight and quickly show you that there's a two-pager which will be shared across all our media platforms as well as available with us. So it's a very quick guide and it's a great way for you to talk to your counterparties about Scma. We'll be hosting them in our social media channel and on our website. The video will be also available on our Scma's YouTube channel. Please feel free to share it and help raise awareness of Scma and its value. Before I launch into the fascinating panel discussion, I would like to make a brief presentation highlighting what Scma has actually done during the new normal and COVID-19 and highlight what we are doing to enhance our relevance as well as maintain the relevance. This is key to Scma's progress and success. I joined as the Executive Director of SCMA in March 2020, and what a time to join, huh? Within 2 weeks, the world was in a series of lockdowns and all the normal assumptions were falling like 9 pins. Travel became a distant dream. Physical meetings and outreach became a challenge. Offices were unapproachable and home became the office and a whole new way of working, and everybody was zooming around. Webinars became the new conferences, and everyone has adapted admirably. SCMA too, I'm proud to say, has risen up to the challenge presented. To start with, we went back to look at SCMA's vision. SCMA's vision is to be the leading Asian arbitration institution for maritime-related disputes. And what are the objectives to achieve this vision? To advance and encourage maritime arbitration, to facilitate the expeditious procedure and disposal of maritime disputes through arbitration, and to advance the professional knowledge of maritime arbitrators. All our actions being put into place with these objectives in mind and to achieve them in a sustainable way will eventually help us realize our vision. In this brief presentation, I will talk about two principal areas in which we have adapted. First is the responses to very specific challenges that were thrown up by COVID-19. And the second is the initiatives that we launched to stay relevant as technology also provided us with amazing opportunities. The first challenge was in regard to outreach efforts. I've been an individual member of SCMA since 2014, and it's always been the physical events of SCMA that ensured the outreach to the community. With COVID-19, this was no longer possible. SCMA has responded admirably to this challenge in the following ways. We have expanded our social media footprint extensively. We've had a 350% increase in LinkedIn followers, a staggering 1,260% increase in updates and activity over the year. We are now on WeChat and steadily adding followers there too. We have hosted several webinars ourselves, including a new series on legal and commercial updates with the Singapore branch of Institute of Chartership Brokers, and collaborated on many more webinars with other institutions. We are starting to create a sustainable reservoir of knowledge sharing through our own YouTube channel and our monthly knowledge sharing email newsletters to showcase and share the knowledge, experience, and expertise of our entire community. Recently, we actually brought out a special knowledge sharing supplement on the Suez Canal incidents and consequences resulting from the Ever Given grounding. It was very well received. Next challenge basically was the inability to hold physical hearings due to COVID-19. Here we have to thank our procedure committee who came up with a user-friendly and adaptable virtual hearing guidelines in quick time. And we also conducted virtual mock arbitration session to showcase the way this actually works. We also held a webinar to discuss virtual hearings, including comments from commercial users to share a broad perspective on this topic. I will also be discussing this aspect with our panel discussion coming up, so look forward to that. Virtual and hybrid hearings are here to stay, but it's a developing situation, so we must continue to remain vigilant towards any challenges and issues it brings up. Then we noticed a trend that digitalization is moving at a frantic pace across the entire industry, and we must capitalize on that as well. As some of you know, my position before SCMA was with Toward Clavenes. In the last few years, I was involved in digital transformation of Clavenes Dry Bulk. So it's a passion that I have brought into SCMA. Subject always to data protection regulations, SCMA is now capturing, using, analyzing a lot more data to create a focused approach to enhance its relevance. Quite a few of you would have filled out our pre and post presentation questionnaires, which ensures sustainable capture of data and clear focus for our entire team to deliver better service to our users. We also realized that technology, specifically QR codes, which have become a part of our daily lives with COVID, can be used to raise awareness to our latest arbitration clauses and also notifying arbitration to us quickly, efficiently, and in a costless manner. SCMA never charged a case filing or admin fees to notify arbitration and now it is even more easier to do so. While we were responding to challenges and trends emerging from COVID-19, we also took proactive measures to launch initiatives which actually enhanced our relevance to the community that we serve. Scma has always prided itself with a global membership base across maritime, trade, and legal communities. We have got shipping companies to give us the commercial understanding. We have got law firms to tap into legal aspects and trading firms to also tap into trade aspects. However, last year, we went and formalized a proper feedback forum in form of Local Users Council, or LUC, comprising of local ship owners, charterers, marine insurance companies, P&I clubs, and for the first time, ship brokers. The LUC provides feedback, raises awareness, and encourages thought leadership in maritime and arbitration-related matters. The council is appointed for a period of 2 years and is a diverse and sustainable way of ensuring that fresh and relevant viewpoints are fed into Scma to constantly improve its offerings. Another initiative, as Lehon also mentioned, was to update the Scma rules, and we conducted a first fully electronic public consultation and got good responses. The rule update is now in its final stages, and we hope to have the new rules in place later this year. We hope that the users will find the revisions to be useful and relevant. This is, after all, the key offering of Scma, an independent, neutral, and efficient framework to resolve maritime and trade disputes efficiently. Finally, we now starting to collaborate with the industry, like again, the PIN, the I in that, and the industry bodies in the most deep and synergistic fashion. The bonds with industry bodies were always strong. We are making them permanent. Scma has been privileged to have the support of BIMCO for years now, and since 2012, it has been a part of one of the dispute resolution options on BIMCO forms and contracts. While that relationship continues with collaborations on 2020 Law and Arbitration Clause, we also collaborated with other arbitration centers. Over and above that, we also signed MOUs with Guangzhou Arbitration Commission and the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers Singapore branch. We now have a closer collaboration with Baltic Exchange Asia in order to create sustainable relationships and to ensure there is no loss of momentum in future. We now have permanent cross-representation on each other's councils and committees with SSA and ICS Singapore. This is vital for our growth and gives a sense of belonging to the community, which is very, very crucial. You can find more details on what we did in 2020 year in review, which is available on our website, www.scma.org.sg. We are always keen to connect and collaborate with you. Please reach out to us, and hope this presentation gave you a good overview of how Scma has pushed the envelope to enhance its relevance for the community that it proudly serves. Hope you found this informative as well. We now have a very simple poll, which we request your participation. Vinny, can we bring up the poll, please? Which of these Scma initiatives interest you? So we have obviously 4 different types of initiatives. Is social media content? Is it webinars? Or is it QR codes in order to report as well as update your clauses? We'll keep the poll open till about 45 seconds. And then we should be able to get that. Yep, maybe another 10 seconds. Yep. Again, the polling, okay. As you can see, the results are being shared on the screen. Webinars are by far the biggest winners, which is great to know. Obviously, we are holding this as a webinar, but it's also good to see that the virtual hearing guidelines are being also used, and so is the social media content. We really, really want to try and increase the awareness of the QR codes. So this kind of feedback is very, very useful for us. Thank you very much for the feedback. Thank you for the responses. We'll continue to work and serve the industry as always. Now it's my pleasure to introduce a stellar panel to discuss arbitration in the new normal and the future of arbitration. First, we have Mr. Chong Ik Wei. Chong Ik Wei is a part of Clyde and Koch shipping and insurance dispute resolution practice. He also spearheads the development of firms' business across Asia. His main practice areas are in shipping, insurance, natural resources, and energy, with a particular focus on disputes connected with China and ASEAN region. Welcome, Ik Wei. He's also a board member of Scma. Pleasure to have you on board. Welcome.
Thank you, Puneet.
Thank you so much. Next we have is Mr. Prem Gurbani. Mr. Prem Gurbani has been in practice for 43 years, and during which he had an opportunity to handle disputes of all manner, including shareholders dispute, joint ventures, commodity contracts, international dispute related to large-scale sale of large-scale industrial machinery, infrastructure disputes, and company charges and mortgages, and of course, shipping and maritime disputes. He's a founder and previously senior partner of Gurbani & Co., a commercial law practice in Singapore. Presently, he is practicing as an arbitrator, mediator, and counsel in Maxwell Chambers Suites here right next door in Singapore. He's a board member of Singapore Maritime Foundation, and he is a panel arbitrator with Scma. Welcome, Prem. It's a pleasure to always speak to you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Alvin Loy. Mr. Alvin Loy studied law at NUS Singapore prior to being admitted as an advocate and solicitor in Singapore in 2001. Prior to joining North, Alvin worked in firms of Gurbani & Co. and Raja & Tan, practicing a wide range of shipping matters, including admiralty and trade disputes. After leaving Raja & Tan as a partner in 2008, Alvin briefly joined School's representative office in Singapore before moving to North in 2009. Alvin is a member of our local users council that we just mentioned. Welcome, Alvin. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Puneet.
And finally, we have Julius Posse from Oldendorf. Julius started his career in 2002, working for the grain traders Topfer ADM in Hamburg, and where he obtained degrees in both international trade as well as in dry bulk shipping. In his 12 years in ADM, he focused on groups shipping-related claims and was also giving opportunities to work in operations and chartering departments in various offices worldwide. So he comes with a tremendous amount of experience. In 2014, Julius started with Oldendorf Carriers, working on variety of claims. Currently he assumes managing authority for commercial claims in the Pacific region, including COVID-19 related matters. Interestingly, Julius is a member of BIMCO subcommittee currently working on revision of the BIMCO infectious or contagious diseases clauses. So that can be very interesting sharing. Julius, welcome. And obviously Oldendorf is proudly a corporate member of Scma. Julius, if you can just turn your video on as well.
Many thanks, Puneet. I have a problem turning it on. It says the host has stopped it.
Very interesting.
Okay,
right,
there it is. Thank you very much for having me, Puneet. Appreciate
Absolutely. So thank you very much. This is really a stellar panel, and obviously I thank everybody for their time and support. Let me start with you, Ik Wei. And the first topic that we are discussing is key challenges resulting due to COVID. Obviously, generically, you had a lot of challenges which everybody has been facing across the globe: mobility, outreach, collaboration, work from home, and other issues. But would you say there are any specific challenges that you actually see resulting from COVID, not only legal, but operational as well as commercial, from a law firm's perspective? If you can just give us that perspective, that can be quite interesting for us to and our audience to understand.
Sure, very happy to. Thank you, Puneet. So as a maritime lawyer in private practice, I think working with clients during a very stressful and challenging period over the past 12 months, I think has certainly thrown up many challenges. And I think one of the key challenges for me was actually to keep the wheels of justice turning amidst the pandemic as far as our clients are concerned. So what do I mean? I think here in Singapore, everything has been fairly smooth sailing in spite of the pandemic as far as the court system is concerned. It's pretty much a business as usual, although Zoom and virtual hearings are now the order of the day. So I was actually very pleasantly surprised this time last year. As you would recall, it was a circuit breaker or lockdown here in Singapore. And yeah, we couldn't go out. Things were fairly restrictive. But we were then asked to, arrest a ship in Singapore over a weekend. And this actually happened because I thought, no way is the arrest going to take place. So we filed the arrest papers on a Sunday over lunchtime. We had an audience with a duty registrar shortly after lunch, of course, with the necessary safe distancing measures in place. We got our order for arrest at 3 p.m. We took a launch out to Eastern Anchorage, and the vessel was arrested by 5 p.m. And the club got involved, security was provided, and the ship was released and sailed off the next day. And for good measure, I must say the ship owner did manage to sign off 3 crew members during that period, and they all flew home safely to their respective jurisdictions. That is Singapore. But I think, as we know, shipping is actually a highly international industry, and advising and working with clients on issues outside of Singapore has proven to be challenging. Just for ship arrests, for instance, I know of a certain North Asian jurisdiction whose courts have currently simply refused to entertain any application for arrest or detention of foreign flag vessels staffed by foreign crew members. Of course, the concern would be, court officials having to board those vessels and therefore exposing themselves to contracting, COVID-19. That's perfectly understandable. Safety is paramount. But I think it's fair to say certain clients with issues in those jurisdictions have been very frustrated that the wheels of justice have stopped turning during this period. Another challenge would be filing protective proceedings to protect time bars. I think as those of us who do maritime law work would know, there are certain time bars which are fairly short. So for a cargo loss and damage claim, you're looking at a 1-year time bar. Intership collision claim is a 2-year time bar. And obviously, there will be time bars coming up for expiry during the pandemic. And again, here in Singapore, you could still issue a writ. You could issue protective proceedings fairly easily because everything is online. But I think the same could not be said of other jurisdictions in Asia where there was no online filing system. And if the court houses were closed, judges were working from home. It was very difficult, if not impossible, to go before the court to file your claim and to have it registered so that the time bar could be protected. And I think to this day, we have various claims across Asia where we are just hoping and praying for the local legislations to be amended such that late filing of those claims would be excused because of the pandemic. So I think those are, from my perspective, some of the legal challenges that I've seen sort of the past 12 months.
Absolutely. That's very informative and I think quite relevant in a lot of ways. Thank you so much, Ikwe. Julius, what about the shipping companies? What kind of challenges have you guys been facing, both operationally, commercially, and legally as well? But obviously, commercial operation challenges are even more acute, I would say, in your company.
Yeah, of course. I mean, during different stages in the pandemic, different issues have arisen, right? We have seen at the very, very beginning that sudden port closures came to play with uncertainty as to duration, which gave delay, logistical interruptions, diverting of ships, considerations. Force majeure matters came to play, but I guess second stage was definitely after I guess the respective jurisdictions recognize that this will not solve the problem, but probably create even more issues. Then the quarantine periods came to play, and which unfolds especially on the issues of our seafarers changing the crew in a safe manner, where, when, how, is key at the moment, with all its influences on the relevant contracts, right? Time charter parties, void charter parties, different issues. Does the crew change constitute a deviation, an allowed one or not? Does the owner have the right to deviate, the liberty to change crew? Quarantine issues, of course, 14 days of last port of call, right? When the owner deviates the ship to change his crew in the next port of call is only a couple of days away. The ship is quarantined. Who's bearing the loss of time, etc.? Notice of readiness issues. I guess we'll go into more detail at a later stage, but just to kick off some headlines, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that means that it's literally opened up a Pandora's box. Obviously, nobody was prepared for these kind of aspects to come into play. But it'll be interesting to hear more in detail, and we should go into that. But let me get to Elvin first and see from a P&I Club's perspective.
Sure.
I mean, what are the key challenges that you have seen and your members probably have seen as well coming back? Obviously, people like Oldendorf are in the same boat in that sense.
Thanks, Puneet. I would echo what both Ikwe and Julius have basically highlighted in terms of the challenges, both legal as well as operational, that we have encountered since the pandemic went global. From an maritime insurer's point of view, I think our initial foremost priority was the welfare and safety of the various crews on board the various ships. Now, this when the pandemic first broke out and there were a lot of restrictions imposed by various ports, it wasn't that critical a stage yet when it came to the length of stays that the crews spent on board the ships. But as time progressed and the crews all started staying beyond what they were contractually obliged to do, then I think there arose more issues about the well-being, both mental and physical, of the various crews, and in the event of incidents or accidents, how ship owners could, in a way, facilitate the disembarkment of the crew. And this is where I guess we as a maritime insurer would have come across many instances where we were met with, I would say, roadblocks, whether they were imposed by local regulations or otherwise, in terms of just dealing with the crew. So these are just examples of the difficulties that we've seen as a club. And moving on to the more, I would say, legalistic side of things, there were, as Julia said, a lot of issues about delays of hires, and we were met with many queries from both owners, operators, and charterers as well, as to which party would bear the responsibilities for such delays. And of course, the situation, as we all know, would change over time, going from a question of delays to a question of how did we then get around the delays and to try to pass the liabilities on to different parties. These are just examples, and I think we probably can talk more about it later down the road.
Absolutely. The nature of disputes obviously has distinctly gone into two phases, as you say, and we'll talk more about it. But that's a very interesting aspect that you're saying, that in some ways you're both two sides of the same coin in some ways, because you are ensuring the members and people like Oldendorf are facing those challenges, and you are trying to also look at it from your perspective and insurance perspective as well. So that's something which is understandable. We can have a quick poll and see what the audience actually feels about the key challenges that they have been facing during the COVID. So we try and see what their viewpoint has been. There are, of course, ability to choose multiple choices. Are the no travel opportunities the biggest challenge for you? The fact that you could not have any outreach, no collaboration option or lower collaboration options. Obviously, virtual is possible. Working from home is, it's a great idea to do it, but it has its own challenges. And of course, companies have lost revenue in sense of what could have been achieved. We've all seen that. So it's great that, we are adapting as best as we can, but these challenges are obviously still a major issue. And I think shipping especially is being an international or global industry on the maritime trade side. I can see that the traveling is probably going to be predominantly the thing that people are waiting to get back as quickly as they can. Unfortunately, the COVID measures are not uniformly executed across all the countries. So even though you may get to travel from Singapore or come into Singapore, you can't do the other way around, which is obviously the case. Yep, we can end the polling now, and I can see very quickly that, yep, that no travel opportunities is 74% of the audience, and I think people are just waiting to get back on that plane and get out to meet their clients and customers. I think I am as well very much charged up that hopefully we get a chance, especially to go around Asia with SCMA's promotional activities resuming as quickly as they can. But that's obviously been the main concern. Now let me get to maybe you, Alvin, and Julius, and Ikwe, saying how much of the actual no travel challenge has actually been surmounted by the solutions that you obviously been able to bring up, like the Zoom and the other virtual meetings. Do you actually see that as a sufficiently reasonable solution right now, or do you see that those solutions are inadequate, to say the least? Yeah. Ikwe, maybe you can start.
I think as far as sort of arbitration hearings and the arbitration arena is concerned, no, I think the solutions that have been proffered or offered, to the market to date, the response has been very quick, if I may say so. And I think initially during the first 2 to 3 months, it's fair to say there was skepticism, there was reluctance, but I think quite quickly people realized that the pandemic was here to stay, and for quite a long period as well. And I think people basically bit the bullet and learn to adapt. And I think we have done fairly well. And I wouldn't say those solutions are all innovative. I think Zoom has been around for a long time.
Yep.
It's just that people, chose the option to fly somewhere to meet someone to have a hearing instead of doing it via Zoom. So I think the solutions as such are not innovative, but I think the pandemic has accelerated and hastened the pace of change, is what I would say.
Okay, we of course have a lot of discussion on virtual hearing later on. But what about you, Julius, with regard to the network of your offices and handling of claims and other things? Do you see that the virtual solutions which are there today have been adequate, or you feel that there is actually a bit of a lag, and the traveling is something which is a crucial aspect of what handling of claims also is all about?
Well, the handling of claims as such, I don't think that it's really influencing me much. You can basically solve problems from wherever you are. From the Oldendorf perspective, the lack of possibility of traveling certainly has its influences, right? It's a very client-based company. It's always good to sit together, to network, to chit-chat. For me, as such, it works fairly well. I mean, fortunately, if I may say so, the pandemic didn't hit 20 or 30 years back. That would have been a much more different story, I guess. But given the technology today, I think we can at least make the best out of it. Yeah,
absolutely. And Alvin, with regard to things like gathering evidence, getting information with these restrictions, whatever solutions you have got, obviously electronic or virtual or others, have they been used? Have any interesting solutions come up where you can actually gather evidence, virtually and vice versa, get access to things in a different way, considering the COVID challenges which are there?
Well, I think, Punit, that is, I guess, probably a continuing challenge for us, and probably for all investigators and surveyors as well. When the COVID pandemic first broke out and there were restrictions on movements of people, we had difficulties getting experts and surveyors on board ships to collate evidence, and even for bunker surveyors to go up to get samples. So that challenge still remains in various parts of the world. In Singapore, I think the restrictions have been more refined now, such that everybody on the ground knows what the playing field is like and knows how to prepare in relation to an attendance on board the ship. But yes, it's still an ongoing challenge for evidence collation. In terms of dealing the substantive claims themselves, as Julius has mentioned, I think that the pandemic has not really impacted too much on that. Even before the pandemic set in, many companies, including North, were already thinking about going paperless, putting in more long-term sustainability policies into place, and making use of modern technology. So a lot of our work was already being done remotely or online. And as Igwe has said, the COVID pandemic just hastened the process.
Absolutely. But one of the things which obviously we found very interesting in SCMA when we hosted the webinars and things like that, we could actually get hold of the global experts from wherever in the world and participate in those events. And at the same time, we also found that getting time from them was not that difficult because obviously they had no traveling to do. So it was quite a revelation that sometimes you used to actually struggle to get the people together, and that has become easier. For sure, we are at the moment using Zoom, but there are other platforms which are obviously very innovative as well, and we have used them to the maximum possible extent. Have you seen this as a trend which is likely to stay even after travel becomes back to normal, let's say, in whatever sense of way, that these webinars and these ways of disseminating information will kind of continue to catch on? What's your view on this, specifically in terms of investment that you're making in solutions in your club, for example?
Well, I think that is essentially a facet of the improved technology that everybody is now using. I think even pre-COVID, we were already in the process of getting experts to assist remotely, and this may be due to differences in time zones, where the experts are located, and also where the situation is happening. So that function itself is not a new one. What has changed, however, is with the impact of better technology. You get more regular and proper and better quality assistance remotely from the experts.
Okay, sure, that's a point. Ikwe, you had a point to add here? Or?
Yes, not specific to Zoom and travel, but I think specific to the legal industry, and I'm mindful that there are quite a few lawyers in the audience today,
Yes.
and I think who probably, I hope, share my view as well. I mean, we as lawyers, are fairly conservative and traditional in our approach. We are slow to change, and I think this has manifested itself in the way we work. So as you know, I mean, sort of shippers and ship operators, insurers, who probably find it surprising, right? That lawyers working in law firms still sit in rooms and enclosed spaces, as opposed to being in an open plan, workspace. And I think the perception before, the pandemic was that, virtual working and open plan seating arrangement would happen, but many lawyers, I think, secretly hope that, it would not happen during their lifetime. But I think, again, I mean, the pandemic has really changed all of that. I think law firms now are actively looking at changing and tweaking their workspaces into more open plan, and in fact, hot desking to an extent. And I suspect post-pandemic, many lawyers will be given the flexibility of working X number of days from home as well. So I think, we have things to be thankful for as far as the pandemic is concerned. And I think for us lawyers, the way we work, I think these solutions have been, accelerated by, I think, 5 to 10 years. I think that's something positive, for me as a lawyer coming out of, the pandemic.
Absolutely. I think that's a very valid point. We have all been pushed at a crazy pace towards this technology. Prem, you had a point. You have unmuted yourself.
I'm sorry?
You had a point. You have unmuted yourself. So I was not sure whether you had to add
No.
something.
Carry on.
No. Okay. But let's come back to the legal aspects. That's basically, we just talking about the legal aspects earlier. The nature of disputes. Now, this is something which I think has been talked about in a constant discussion across various stakeholders. What has been COVID related and what has probably been anyway there before that as well. The disputes have actually had a very distinct flavor of COVID being added into it. And I think if we can actually start with Julius a little bit about what you were already mentioning with regard to the kind of things that you're facing today. If you can just elaborate a little bit on that and see how have you seen the last year's disputes? You know, the initial part maybe was a different phase of disputes or type of disputes. And then obviously now it's more about the new normal and the related disputes because of that. So that could be an interesting take from Oldendorf's perspective. And then I'll go to the rest of the lawyers and see how we can talk it from that other point of view. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, Punit, the real heroes of our industry currently are the seafarers, right? To keep them safe and sound, you know, care for their health, make sure they get safely onto the ships, they get safely back home is certainly key. Mostly, of course, because of the human factor. Secondly, as well to avoid disputes, right? An area of dispute is, let's assume you have a ship in ballast to Australia, you change your crew in Manila, the on-signers test positive at the load port. That will have a massive impact, right? We have seen ships, not ours, but who had to return to Manila to change the whole crew at their own cost, risk, right? Shippers obviously face tremendous impacts on the logistics, sales contract issues, etc., right? So at the moment, I think it's all about the seafarers, right? And the implications of changing the crew, right? As said earlier, some owners have to divert their ships in circumstances where there's a lot of restrictions regarding changing the crew. Where is it possible, right? It's just very, very restricted to a very few areas. So deviation issues arise. Is the deviation a breach, or was there a right to deviate, right? The quarantine periods attached to such deviations of last port of call issues, right? Who's taking up the bill, etc. So that is key, and I think that will remain key until regulations will change in various countries, offering the industry more opportunities to do the crew changes at the charter's ports of call, right?
Absolutely. And I think in this case, Prem, if I may actually request you that interesting message that you just received that you shared with us, maybe if you could just share that with us, a live example of what kind of guidance the parties are seeking and kind of disputes that they're having, that could be very useful for our audience. Go ahead, Prem.
Right. This came in a few minutes ago. And it says, we would like your opinion on the following issue on COVID quarantine. We have a vessel calling Balawan from India. The sailing time from load to discharge port is about 7 days. Upon arrival, all crew are instructed to have the PCR test to be taken. I'm reading literally. If results are found negative, then the vessel will have to observe 14 days isolation, including sailing time before being able to berth. There is no clause indicating whether this time is to be counted as lay time. However, charterers feel that the master should not tender an NOR if the vessel is not ready to discharge. Thus, lay time should not count. Your opinion, please.
Right. So this is a real live example of something that's happening as we speak. And there are so many of these cases obviously there. And it would be great to have some overall discussion on something like this that comes in. Probably, Julius, you had an opinion on this. If you can just go ahead, and then the rest of the panelists can chip in as well.
Yeah, obviously, with the amount of ships on the water, right? This is a very, very frequent problem arising, very common. And let me give you a very general opinion on that, right? I mean, much will depend on circumstances on the ground as well as the contractual provisions. But in the absence of any agreements on that, right? We would have to look at who bears the time, right? I mean, the owner has to trigger the lay time via a valid notice of readiness, right? Speaking of validity of the notice of readiness, certain criteria has to be fulfilled, such as that the vessel will be ready in all respects, including legal readiness, obviously, right? Reasonable doubts will arise as to the validity of such notice of readiness once tendered, right? Let's assume the berth is ready on arrival and the owner tenders a notice of readiness. The master notifies his readiness. And the cargo interests say, come on in. But in circumstances where the vessel is under quarantine, unable to go in, the notice of readiness may well likely not be ready, right? Speaking of free fatigue issues, which generally can be seen as a mere formality, right? But as said, in circumstances where there's basically a sticker on the ship, you have to serve a certain amount of quarantine days prior us taking you in, considering you ready. The free fatigue issue cannot be a mere formality, right? But it's a real hindrance. So yeah.
Absolutely. And these are actually live issues, and they keep changing because the countries have different level of increased COVID challenges happening from time to time. Other panelists, I would love to hear from you in terms of any preliminary views. Of course, you don't need to give any specific legal views on this, but just a preliminary view on what this might be all about, or if you've come across situations like this, that can be very useful to share. Any one of you? Alvin, you want to go?
Yeah, sure, Puneet. I think Julius has put it across very well there. There used to be an issue as to whether or not the requirement to spend that amount of time in anchorage, waiting time, would be associated with free fatigue. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the local procedures in Palawan are, and whether or not free fatigue is a separate procedure altogether. But assuming that at the end of the 7 days or 14 days waiting time, you are issued a free fatigue certificate or clearance, then it is arguable as to whether or not having to wait there is a formality.
Okay.
Right.
Sure. Okay, that's a viewpoint. Ikwe and Prem, if you have anything to add before we go to the next set of discussions.
Yeah, perhaps just chiming in here. I mean, not specific to that scenario earlier, but looking back at the past 12 months, we have really seen different types of disputes and issues coming across our desk during different periods. So I think January to May last year, I think it was a peak period for force majeure advice. And basically clients were coming to us, could we get out of contractual performance? Could we extend the time to perform? And I think there was quite a lot of uncertainty back then. I think before the World Health Organization declared what was happening then, the pandemic, I think on the 11th of March last year. I think prior to that, it was a big question mark as to how do you classify what was happening at that point in time. So I think there was a lot of uncertainty at that point in time. And I think what followed then was, this distinction that force majeure actually excuses inability to perform. It doesn't excuse performance which became more expensive or which became sort of uneconomical to perform. I think this is all about passing on costs and expenses arising from the pandemic, such as your PCR test, such as your waiting period at a port, such as your quarantine, crew members needing to spend 14 days somewhere. Who bears the cost? And I think in the next 1 to 2 years, we'll see a fair number of litigations and arbitrations dealing with these issues. And I think one final point is actually in the energy space, which again relates to trading and which relates to shipping as well, particularly in the oil tanker trade. At some point again in March, April last year, the price of Brent crude dropped from $60 to $25 per barrel. And obviously that had a domino effect on the energy trading industry and the oil tanker sector. And I think without naming names, most of us would be aware that several high-profile insolvencies, have resulted from that. And yeah, that has kept many maritime lawyers busy, and I'm sure they will continue to be occupied on those matters for the next few years to come.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for the overview. I think it's a good view of how things have progressed. The nature of the cases have changed. Obviously, some of them are in the pipeline and may actually have a knock-on impact, which is what we really have to wait and watch. Alvin, you would have a similar experience in the club of the nature of disputes changing in the first half of the COVID challenges and second half as such? Or?
Yes. I think what we saw were, well, I think overall you could describe it as a moving feast of changing legal issues. I think when we first encountered all the force majeure sort of issues, questions, and everything else, and subsequently, I think when the ports started developing their own bespoke requirements for foreign vessels and crews to call, then we had ancillary issues arising from that. For example, in many charter parties, the risks of quarantine are usually for the owners, but many owners try to get around this by drawing a distinction between quarantine for COVID and normal quarantine. The problem, however, is that with this pandemic becoming global, right? Okay, a quarantine for COVID is now a normal quarantine. So it's a bit of a moving goalpost there, and so we find that we get a lot of claims and issues that in a way sometimes they repeat, but other times they just come with a different twist. We also have perhaps a little bit more interesting issues, like for example, where unfortunately a crew member passes away on board the ship, and you have to disembark the body. But because of COVID restrictions, right, many ports are reluctant to allow disembarkation. And then the big question comes, who pays for the time and the cost? Another aspect of it, very, very different situation, would be where you have the sale and purchase of ships. Typically, at the time of delivery, you'd have the new crew taking over the ship. But then you have problems on the buyer side who run into logistical problems trying to get their new crew ready and able to go up onto the ship. So these are just a sampler of all the various issues across the entire shipping industry that we've come across in the last 12 months.
Absolutely. I think this is a good example of how some of the totally unexpected areas that you can see disputes and challenges coming up. We've got very interesting set of people in the audiences. We would like to hear what they feel about what kind of challenges they have faced during the COVID time. So maybe a poll now to just get quickly their reactions, what they have actually seen. What sort of legal disputes did your organization face during COVID-19? Was it force majeure, delays, breach of contract, insolvency, seafarer-related issues? So obviously that's something which is very interesting to hear as to what has been the major impact for most of these people in the audience, the companies which have actually faced it. So we've got about another 15 seconds to go. We've got about 50% of the audience which have voted. But this, as you said, it's again a two phases scenario. And the biggest challenge has obviously been in the first phase where there have been force majeure issues and delays. So I have a feeling that that probably is going to be the crucial aspect which will be there. Right, so we can stop the polling now, and we can share the results. And we have got pretty much force majeure and delays on breach of contract as the top. But now you can see seafarer related issues are neck to neck with force majeure as well. So that's kind of good to know in terms of the phase of the disputes. But these are challenges which will have, I would say, the knock-on impacts will be there, and the crystallization of claims does take its own time. So I have a feeling that this will be some time before we actually see the final claims flowing through as such. Right, so this brings me to the fourth area which I wanted to discuss with the panel here. And this is a discussion on virtual hearings. Virtual hearings were something that I think I read a poll when I joined SCMA last year that less than 13% of the arbitrators which were polled by Queen Mary College a year before actually had any awareness, knowledge, or inclination to look at virtual hearings. So obviously that has changed, I'm sure, in the next poll that hopefully comes out. But there are lots and lots of practical issues which obviously come in. So maybe I can get Prem to start. As a person who's involved in virtual hearings now on a regular basis, what has really been the experience, and what is actually the biggest challenge you would probably face as an arbitrator, having gone through a virtual hearing compared to a physical one?
Okay, let me say I prefer to call them e-hearings nowadays instead of instead of virtual hearings. It's also
Right.
easier to say e-hearings.
Yes, hearings. Okay, that's a new one.
The practical challenges. I mean, speaking from the experiences that I've had are in really two areas. One is in the area of arbitrator training, and I'll just expand on that in a minute.
Yeah.
And the other area where there are practical challenges is the process itself, the hearing itself, and what takes place after the hearing. Now, when I refer to the challenges in the arbitrator training area, I'm reminded of what the Minister for Transport said when he opened Maritime Week on Monday. He said, you know, there's a difference between digitization and digitalization. Now,
Correct.
sitting there, I thought to myself, as a mere lawyer, is there a difference? So I've now found out that there is a difference. Digitization, of course, is just the process by which you convert your paper and all your material into a form that can be used by a computer so you can access it. But that has been going on for a long time. Although arbitrators have not been making use of the process, it has been going on for a long time. But digitalization is different. It is making use of the digitized material during the hearing, before the hearing, during the hearing, and after the hearing in order to achieve the outcomes that you are used to in the past. And not only that, improving on those outcomes. Now, it used to be that when we had a hearing, we would be asked by the parties, all right, where would you like the bundles to be sent? Right? So we would say, yeah, well, you can send it to my office. I'll be here between this and that time, and the bundles will duly arrive and so forth. But that seems to be happening less and less often now, especially with parties that are in all sorts of different jurisdictions. The bundles do not get here at all, or they get here late, sometime during the hearing or even after the hearing because of the problems that we're having. So, and lawyers being who they are, they tell you they're going to give you the bundle 1 week before time. It won't arrive until, say, 12 hours before time. So if you really want to read in advance, you better get au fait with the fact that you have to get onto the computer and do your reading, right? So the digitalization process involves the arbitrators teaching themselves or being taught how to use the material that is delivered to them. I mean, these are fairly mundane things, but this doesn't come naturally to a lawyer or an arbitrator. How do you access the documents, the exhibits? How do you read them? Importantly, how do you bookmark, during the process of an e-hearing? And an arbitrator makes all sorts of notes as he's hearing during the proceedings. How does he make notes? Right? There's a process by which you can actually make notes on your screen so that they stay there. There's a process by which you can bookmark so that bookmark stays there. You must learn all these things as you go along, and we are learning. We are getting there. Some of us are there, some of us are not, but it is a learning process. And after the hearing, if you do not know how to access your bookmarks, for instance, I mean, in January or February last year, you just took up your physical bundle. Your bookmarks are there. The stickers that you put on at the time, they're in all sorts of colors, you can see, right? And then you just open them up and that's it. But no, not now. Now you have to be able to actually access your bookmarks after the hearing. And then, you must know how to copy materials, paste, and so forth. In other words, you have to be engaged in the whole value process. And this, in my opinion, is causing a lot of difficulties with the arbitrators, especially some of us are a bit long in the tooth and we're struggling with it, right? But it's coming along. We are learning as we see more and more of these e-hearings coming along. The arbitrators are learning, and hopefully it'll be something that they are so comfortable with that they won't go back to the old days where we had all these bundles arriving, boxes, sometimes roomfuls of boxes, right? We no longer get them. So that's one area in which there are practical challenges. The other area, the area where there are practical challenges, arise from what happens during the hearing itself. Okay, let me give you a mundane example. You have a tribunal of 3. During the hearing, there's a lot of interaction between the arbitrators. What do you think what do you think about this point? The chairman is interacting all the time because he wants the views of his co-arbitrators on this or that point, and whether to allow this or that question, and so forth. Now, first hearing I had, how are we going to communicate with each other without the parties knowing? You see? So after that the first morning, we said, all right, let's open up a WhatsApp channel. We have to think of something. Let's open up a WhatsApp channel. But then you see, you are paying attention to the proceedings. You're looking at a Zoom screen. You're looking at multiple parties at once. You can't be looking at your WhatsApp channel on the phone. So you miss those messages. You don't see those messages unless it's buzzing all the time. So these are the practical difficulties. What about screen fatigue? I can tell you from experience that looking at a screen is not the same thing as being in a physical arbitration. In a physical arbitration, you could do with one break in the morning, maybe 10 minutes, and one break in the afternoon. I find that very difficult to do with an e-hearing. The attention spans in an e-hearing are, in my experience, no more than an hour, after which you have to take a break. So there are these two breaks in the morning and there are 2 breaks in the afternoon, and the parties appreciate it because looking at a screen takes far more attention than handling a physical hearing. Right? And it's not just screen fatigue, it is also the number of screens that you need in an international arbitration and some shipping arbitrations as well. The number of screens that you have to deal with are 3. One for the Zoom hearing, one for the live transcript, and one, now we have developed it even further, one for communications between arbitrators, which have moved from the WhatsApp from the phone to a desktop WhatsApp.
Okay.
So that WhatsApp screen is then divided into 2, is split into 2 for a WhatsApp conversation between the arbitrators and a WhatsApp conversation between the service provider who's running the proceedings.
Oh.
So you have 4 different centers of attention that you need to handle. Right? All that it takes training.
Absolutely.
The witness evidence from abroad, witnesses don't come in anymore, also pose their own challenges. That also poses its own challenges. I mean, witnesses giving evidence by video link, that's nothing new. The courts have done it for many years. It's also been done in arbitrations for many years. But this whole thing about witnesses giving evidence by through Zoom, through a Zoom link has really come into prominence with COVID-19. So how do you, it used to be dealt with by sending an associate over to the place where the witness is giving his evidence, helping him with the documents, seeing that everything is in order, no one else is in the room while he's giving evidence and so forth. But that cannot be done anymore. You can't be sending associates all over the place. So how do you deal with it? Mundane things again. Can you pick up your camera and bring it around the room to show everyone that there's no one else in the room? Well, he does that. But then let me tell you one more experience. After he has done that, half an hour into the proceedings, watch his eyes, there's somebody else in the room. You can watch the witness's eyes and tell there's somebody else in the room, right? So
Yes.
those are the difficulties that come about.
So obviously, this is a very fascinating view from somebody who's facing these challenges day in, day out. Obviously, some of them can be resolved with your own initiative, but some you need a formal training as such. But this is from an arbitrator's perspective, and we definitely go back to that in a minute, Prem. But let's say from a lawyer who actually has to have an e-hearing. Now, I will use e-hearing from now on as a good word because I think it flows nicely. E-hearings. So in e-hearings, obviously with the lawyers, what are the challenges that you face when you're presenting a case or arguing a case in a case of an e-hearing? If you can kind of fill me up on that, if you actually have any experience or have heard of any.
I think as someone who may potentially need to appear before Prem, and I think sort of some of the practical challenges of e-hearing could actually be done away with some planning. These are often very small details, which I think if we as lawyers and counsels apply our minds to it, it could be avoided. So what do I mean, right? Simple things such as background. I know for a fact some arbitrators simply dislike virtual background and filters for various good reasons. And I think running the risk of actually appearing at a hearing with virtual background behind you, I think it will serve the counsel well to check in advance with the tribunal what is the preference. So I think that's something very, very small that you could check to avoid any irritation on the part of the tribunal. Second, attire. I think very often people forget that an e-hearing is just as good as a physical in-person hearing. That needs to be decorum. You know, seriousness needs to be given to the occasion. I'm not sure about Prem's experience, but I've had an arbitration hearing, not as an arbitrator, but as a counsel, where the other side's counsel turn up in a polo t-shirt for the hearing. Is that acceptable? Is that not? I'm no judge of that. But I think at that particular hearing, I could sense that certain members of the tribunal were not impressed, shall we say. So I think those are things that there are challenges, but I think with a bit of planning, they could be sort of done away with. And picking up on what Prem said earlier about witness evidence. So I think on the other side of the fence, as a counsel, cross-examining a witness, this has been done in the past. Virtual examination or cross-examination of witnesses is nothing new. But what I would say is, in a case where issues of fraud and dishonesty are important, or where we feel that the credibility of witnesses will come into play, my personal preference is still to have an in-person physical hearing. Because as some of us know, cross-examination is a lot about, the momentum, feeling the presence of the place, reading the body language, the responses of the witnesses. And I think that you can't get 100%, on the screen.
I entirely
agree. I think those are just my comments sort of as a counsel in an arbitration.
Valuable.
No, I mean, just to add to that, I mean, I don't do court work very often now, but I would be very disappointed if I didn't get to cross-examine an adverse witness face to face in court, because the sort of damage that I could do to him in court is quite different. It's quite different. It's almost like a filter, in e-hearing. So it's not quite the same.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very valid point. And obviously we can discuss more about the future, where we see it going, but it is going to be interesting to discuss that as well. Coming to the user side of things, I know, Julius, by the way, you can wear a polo in a webinar, that's not a problem, but just don't go to virtual hearing or e-hearing and doing that. But going back to what from a user's perspective, obviously massive saving of cost, and I'll come back to Alvin on the P&I side as well. That this is of course a godsend in some ways, that it's actually saving you on traveling costs and everything else that goes around with it. Do you actually see this as something that you would encourage as a company or as users, saying let's get everything to go virtual now? Or do you actually feel that there's a balance to be achieved here? What is your view on this, Julius?
Well, Punit, I think
Sorry,
from an insurer's perspective, we are more often than not also litigation funders.
Sure. Absolutely.
So on that, just wearing that hat alone, e-hearings, right, equate to savings in time and savings in costs in terms of travel expenses. That obviously is a tangible factor. It has to be weighed against the what I would say are intangible benefits of having a physical hearing, and what advantages that you can draw out from that. But just looking at it from a cost-benefit analysis, and from an insurer's perspective, this is something that I see as a positive development.
Absolutely, and I agree. I think that seems to be the consensus, but we can get more on it. Julius, do you want to add something from your side on this? Obviously, as a user, you probably are in line with what Alvin just said in terms of P&I clubs pushing or at least promoting this more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially when especially these days, cost effectiveness is a big issue, right? So every dollar saved is a good dollar. So definitely, that may well be one of the very small advantages of the whole thing, right?
Absolutely.
But otherwise, I definitely echo that.
Okay, that's very interesting. So now we have the second last poll before we actually come to the last topic, and that poll is about what is the preference of the audience. What do they feel about the arbitration hearing? Do they prefer virtual? Do they prefer physical? Or do they prefer a hybrid? Obviously, hybrid is something where you still have the facilities of having a few people going into a physical environment, and then you have a e-hearing linking to that. So I have got, I think, a mix of all kinds of users or stakeholders in the audience. So hopefully we got a good cross-section view on what the preference is. And I think you're right about the fact that maybe there are lots of cost-benefit analysis, but in general, certain element of e-hearing will always be present in all future hearings. And we'll talk about the future of arbitration in a second now, but this is leading to a nice discussion on to that. What is the feeling? What is the actual view on the audience? We can stop the polling now. Yep, and we have got a winner at hybrid. And that is 51%, but 41% actually prefer physical hearings and 8% only e-hearings. So pure e-hearings, I think, is not still caught on that kind of, let's say, appeal as one would think. And I think a lot of people are probably waiting for things to change with the COVID and then come back to, let's say, old times in some ways. And that's the last theme that I have to discuss with the panel here. What, according to them, is the future? Do they see that the trends which are sweeping, like Lehun mentioned in the opening remarks, sweeping the industry with digitalization, with other aspects about industry trying to rationalize and change its working methods in general, flexibility being built into a lot of the things going forward? The legal industry has always been a little bit more formal in that sense. So the formality aspect is something which is there probably more in courts. But when it comes to arbitration, it's more, let's say, less formal. It's still formal, but it's less formal. And obviously, it has a lot of party autonomy in terms of how they want to structure the overall arbitration as such. So given those aspects, where do you see the future? And I would just like to hear a few points from each one of you in your own way. Where does the lawyers see the futures of the legal industry for their part of the industry? And where does the P&I club see the future in terms of certain trends there to stay or to reverse or partially reverse? And so with the users and finally to the arbitrators. So maybe Ikwe, I can start with you, then Alvin, then Julius, and Prem finally.
Sure. No, I think e-hearing is here to stay, like it or not. I think some of the benefits have been identified earlier. Cost savings, that I think is key. Time savings as well. You have arbitrators, lawyers, clients, witnesses flying half across the world to attend a hearing. The time span is tremendous, especially for the witnesses. You fly all that way for a 1 or 2 hour appearance before the tribunal. So I think, cost and time savings, that's key. And delays and scheduling issues, what we have found is e-hearings have made it that much easier and quicker to align diaries and schedule hearings that work for everyone. So I think that's another plus. And of course, I think in line with the theme of the Singapore Maritime Week of, decarbonization, green transportation, I think it's something that's often not, talked about, but virtual hearing or e-hearing is part and parcel of a greener arbitration. The savings, the travel that, you don't do or do less of, that's reducing carbon footprint. Prem spoke a lot about, digitization and digitalization. And again, doing away with bundles of submissions, claim documents, authorities, and what have you. That's being environmentally friendly and responsible as well. And I think if this e-hearing option is cheaper, more cost-effective, quicker, and if you could save a few trees along the way, why not? Is what I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's well said. Absolutely, Alvin. From a P&I club's perspective, do you already kind of on the bandwagon? I would say that most of the P&I clubs have already been looking at technology in a lot of ways to share information, to make sure that the members are kind of kept up to date with what's going on. Do you see more of that happening? Do you see some change happening in terms of how you approach the members as well as claims in general. You seem to be mute for some reason. Oh no, you're not mute, but your voice is this a buzz effectively, which is. Yeah, there seems to be some kind of a. You want to re-log in? I don't know. Maybe that's probably created the issue. You might have to re-log in. We can not hear you. Maybe you can unmute yourself. Okay, I think he's trying to re-log in. Julius,
Maybe I can jump the queue. Yeah, giving him some time to
absolutely.
sort
Jump
that
the
out.
queue.
Absolutely. Well, I honestly think that the coronavirus pandemic is basically just accelerating a process that was in any event coming up on us, right? Due to the technology, virtual meetings, right? Hearings, etc., and so on and so forth, right? You save, as Ikwe pointed out, right? You not only save money, you save time being money, you even save more, right? So I think that is one of the pros as well, that the coronavirus pandemic is accelerating, but in any event this was coming up on us sooner than later, right? So yeah.
Do you see any of the trends that you were using before the pandemic happened to kind of go back to the old days in that sense? Is that something which you see will be the pattern, or do you actually see that some of the changes or all the changes are irreversible in some ways?
Well, in some way, I think it will very much depend on the issues at stake, right? I think we have all learned that virtual meetings are very effective, right? As we see now, obviously, what we will all miss after this webinar is to get together on a little buffet and a cocktail. However, we are deprived of that. But in any event, I think we're all sitting in the same boat as far as these issues are concerned, and we certainly strive to make the best out of it. And so some things will be irreversible, right? Probably more towards also working from home. So yeah. It will depend. Yeah.
And you see Ollendorf, for example, continuing with the flexible working hours and everything that goes along with that. So that's something that you think is new and there to stay, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, that has to be seen, right? But certainly it might have accelerated a process that there was in any event coming up on us, right? As said. So yeah.
Our experience is that when people look at this and say it works, then they actually say, okay, fair enough. But before that, it was never tested and tried in this way, in a mass scale like this. So obviously, people are getting more aware of these solutions as they find themselves. Prem, you have a fairly clear view that you think that the old school physical hearings may not come back at all. I think the audience also echoes that view as such. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to land up with hybrid hearings from this point onwards. I mean, it's absolutely clear that there's a lot of cost saving, and and it's a green way to go. So we are never going to see the old days where the hearing is going to be entirely physical, unless the parties, for some reason or other, prefer it. I'd rather look at it from the point of view, 2 points of view. What do the parties prefer, and what do the arbitrators themselves prefer? Right. I can tell you that the parties and the clubs who finance them and so forth would naturally prefer an e-hearing or some form of hybrid hearing. But I can also tell you from my interaction with fellow arbitrators and so forth, that while we are perfectly happy with opening statements and this and that not being dealt with in physical hearings, and you don't even, for me, I don't even require anyone to refer to an opening statement. I mean, I go the way that the things are happening in court, where the judge often says, look, I've read your opening statement, just call your first witness and get on with it. Don't tell me the story, I've already read it. Yeah. Right. So so for that, it'll be a waste of time, right? To have a physical hearing. And it also may be a waste of time to have a physical hearing for legal argument, where the arbitrators or the sole arbitrator or the panel can interact with counsel, and they can have a Zoom hearing, and the dialogue can go on and on for as long as you like, right? So the issue, the area in which some parties are not sure what to do is in the area of evidence, right? There's no doubt that formal witnesses who come on and say something for half an hour, 1 hour, and so forth, and then fly back, that's just a lark. I mean, you don't need, to have a physical hearing for that purpose. But then there are certain witnesses who are on the stand for, say, who give evidence for days, and their evidence is very controversial. And for those witnesses, generally, I mean, from my point of view, I would prefer for the witness to be there.
Sure.
And sometimes I've handled a hearing where the witness is there, but his counsel is elsewhere. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
It doesn't really matter. So he's giving evidence. We want to see him, and he wanted to come, and that party wanted the witness to be heard by us in person. Now, so yes, we are going to land up with hybrid hearings. I've recently been consulted by in-house counsel who actually wants to write in a requirement for e-hearings in the arbitration clause.
Wow.
To say, you cannot refuse e-hearings. And that, however, the tribunal will have the discretion if necessary, but they actually are thinking of writing these things into the arbitration clauses.
Interesting. That's a very interesting viewpoint. And if that is in the contract, then obviously it brings a completely different flavor to the entire discussion.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you said the party's intention is a key aspect of how people deal with it. Yeah. But interesting. Alvin, are you able to get back? Yes, you are.
Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes, we can. Yeah. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I think all three of my fellow panelists have made very valid and salient points. And coincidentally, I would just like to conclude by saying, I think in the future, going forward in the future, we are probably going to be seeing a lot more e-hearings. We will unlikely see the end of actual physical hearings, as what Prem and Igwe have said, that there may be occasions where a physical hearing is preferable. But I think we can probably safely say that the particular nature and type of hearing will ultimately depend on the nature and type of dispute, right, in question. Not all disputes involve an element of fraud or dishonesty. In fact, in my experience, most shipping disputes usually don't.
Right.
And if they did, right, it would be a massive dispute.
Sure.
where cost would not be an issue.
Exactly.
So I think we're all right here in that going forward, we'll tend to see a preponderance of e-hearings for smaller, probably more succinct issues, and probably a mixture of hybrid hearings for more technical or factual disputes, and I think that's probably where we are going to be in the near future.
Fantastic. I think that's a good summary. That's a good conclusion in that sense. From our perspective, I think one of the points that Prem brought up, which I think is very relevant, is arbitrator training. I think there is a huge potential of institutes, including probably Scma, trying to actually help the arbitrators in terms of any kind of tools and aspects where they can be trained. Not in terms of specific programs, but probably tips and tricks which can probably help them practically as well, and things like that. So obviously, I think it's a very good pointer in that direction. And I know for a fact that there are some arbitrators whom I've spoken to who says that the best thing they've discovered is highlightable PDF and 3 screens that they can manage their cases on. So things like that, obviously, people are learning as they're going along, and there's no substitute to experience. But I think the tips and tricks and training is something which is very crucial as such. We have a last poll coming up now in terms of what the audience feels about the changes. Do they actually see the change happening for real, or what is it? Has COVID-19 encouraged a permanent push towards digitalization? And I repeat, digitalization in the arbitration process and offerings in general. So you actually see that digitalization becomes an integral part of the process. Papers will go away. The way the analysis are done will also change considerably. So I think there is definitely looking like an overwhelming push towards that, and I think the audience also is looking at that aspect as well. But I think in general, I find that the off-the-rack solutions are probably more relevant when it comes to shipping industry, but there are a lot of legal tech companies and legal tech solutions which are obviously there. I know Singapore courts already have e-filing and other aspects in place. So there is no reason why arbitrations cannot also start digitalizing their offerings. Various centers have already started looking at that, and I think things will go forward there as well. So we can stop the polling now. It's a minute of that, and we can share the results. There you go. 91% believe that it is permanently changed or pushed in terms of digitalization in arbitration process and offerings in general. So this is a very clear sign that we see, and maybe COVID has brought us to that that level of acceptability that digital solutions are an integral part of our working. We have had situations where people have tried and tested methods in past, Zoom included, by the way, that they actually did some beta testing at one point of time. Not sure whether this will be a solution which will be embraced by the public, but as COVID suddenly brought out, every solution has got tremendous amount of testing and acceptability going forward. So before I actually finish off, I would just like to thank each and every panelist as well as the audience which have participated, also Lehun, who gave the opening remarks. For us, we have a mission, a challenge on our hands in terms of how to continue to remain relevant and keep improving our offerings going forward. It's going to be an effort which has to be with the support of all the people who are right now on the panel, directly, indirectly, and more importantly, everybody in the entire industry, maritime, legal, and trade, all put together. So thank you so very much. I just have one final thing. I know this is for question and answers, but we do have some time, and I just wanted to ask one question which one of my friends, Mehmet, has actually asked. Have you seen a shift in choice towards Singapore for handling and settlement of legal matters with changing landscape of Hong Kong? Controversial question, but maybe if data is there to support it, if any one of you would like to attempt it, otherwise we can revert back to them at a later stage by looking at data. Ikwe or Alvin, maybe you are probably able to give us some insights on this. Do you see a shift towards Singapore because of Hong Kong's situation? Do you actually see that, or you're not really able to comment because data may not be there? Yeah?
Well, a short answer to this sensitive question is yes. I think we have seen clients and sort of pivoting some of their choice of dispute resolution, arbitration in particular, from Hong Kong to Singapore because of the landscape at the moment. And I think in the shipping and maritime space, Singapore is in fact well placed as well, because if you're looking at an ad hoc, arbitration mechanism for resolving your disputes, Singapore does offer Scma. Whereas I think Hong Kong is probably a latecomer to the game. I believe Hong Kong now has the Maritime Arbitration Group,
Yes,
which offers a sort of a hybrid ad hoc arbitration as well. But I think SCMA is sort of 11 years old, and I think there is that track record. And I think, yeah, yes, shipping disputes, shipping contracts, we're starting to see sort of a slight pivot towards Singapore, and SCMA has been sort of favored. But I don't see it as a zero-sum game. There are still advantages of why you may want to choose a Hong Kong arbitration, particularly with Chinese counterparties. I believe there are agreements in place between mainland China and Hong Kong, such that certain preservative actions, sort of asset preservation type measures, could still take place in China in aid of a Hong Kong arbitration. But I believe the same cannot be said of a Singapore-seated arbitration. So I think, as I said, it's not a zero-sum game. Both dispute resolution centers have its advantages and disadvantages. But I think, yeah, only time will tell as to whether users have indeed pivoted choice of arbitration to Singapore.
Work in progress, absolutely. Alvin, any points to add from your side?
Just two. I think that it's probably still too early in the day to say with any confidence that there's been a noticeable shift. And secondly, I think with hearings going online or e-hearings style, I think over time we anticipate that the venue of the arbitration may be a more secondary or tertiary factor, so long as parties can agree to where the seat of the arbitration lies. So in terms of practicalities, what COVID has actually brought to the arbitration environment here is this increased awareness that you don't have to have a physical hearing or presence for a hearing, where so long as you protect yourselves in terms of agreeing to where the arbitration seat is. So I'm not entirely sure whether or not there will be that great a difference overall down the road.
Absolutely. Okay, that's a valid point. Obviously, Prem and Julius, you may have some comments on this, or you may actually have not seen it actually change in your landscape as yet. But as I said, it's a developing situation from that perspective. And in general, it's good to hear the views and make sure that we keep ourselves abreast with what's changing around in Asia as well, for sure. Any last comments or points from you, Prem or Julius, at all on this?
No, on the last point that Alvin made about seat and venue, I mean,
Yes.
that really is something that has not really changed. I mean, it's always been the case that you can sit wherever you like, and so long as you agree on the seat. So in that sense, it doesn't really matter where you have your e-hearing. Or whether it can be said that the e-hearing is taking place in Singapore as opposed, and sometimes the arbitrators sit in 3 different jurisdictions, so venue obviously is irrelevant. I just finished one where all 3 arbitrators were in 3 different jurisdictions, and if you add the parties, you have 5 different jurisdictions. So
absolutely. Okay, that's a very valid point. Julius, anything to add from your side on this?
Yeah, very general remark. Actually, I'm here in Singapore now since 9 years, and I have looked at a massive amount of contracts in course of looking at disputes, and I do actually see a tendency over the last, say, 5+ years from clients from various countries within Asia to promote the arbitration. English law, but the seat in Singapore according to SCMA terms, which we do welcome, of course. But yeah, I guess we see that more and more.
That's very good news. And as I said, we continue to work on that.
Well done.
Sorry, absolutely. Thank you so very much. As I said, a lot of effort has gone over the years, and we continue to push ahead with that as well. Thank you so very much for all of you, for your time, for your support, and for all the efforts that are being put by each one of you and the audience who actually participated quite well in this polls as well. I'll just share the QR code for the post-webinar survey that we have. Just 1 minute. Here we go. Yep. And that's the last thing that we are just doing, a post-webinar survey. You can actually scan this QR code and access the post-webinar survey. We will also be sending you some links by email just to get your feedback as well. But at the end of the day, we find that this is absolutely remarkable exercise for us to be able to conduct this virtual webinar and talk to so many experts at the same time. We wish that the physical events will come back soon. Let's very much hope so. Singapore Maritime Week has seen some hybrid events, which is a good sign that things may happen, but we still don't have travelers from abroad, which is the key aspect. We really want the global discussions to start on a physical level, which we hope we'll see as well. And we will continue to keep you updated on how SCMA will have its efforts going in that direction as well. Thank you very, very, very much in this regard, and have a good evening. Thank you so much for your time, guys. Thank you.